No one warns you when a path looks empowering, but leads to isolation. Before we go deeper, hit subscribe and like the video. This is DepthRealm, where we expose the shadows so you can see the truth. Modern women believe they're moving forward. They believe they're evolving. They believe they're breaking free from outdated roles, expectations, and limitations. But there's a difference between freedom and drift. And most women don't realize they've crossed it. Because the most dangerous paths don't feel dangerous at first. They feel validating. They feel applauded. They feel progressive. And by the time the consequences arrive, the damage is already done. The modern woman has been sold a story. A seductive one. A story that says independence equals fulfillment. That autonomy replaces intimacy. That self-focus replaces connection. That strength means never needing anyone. But psychology doesn't care about slogans. Biology doesn't care about ideology. And the nervous system never negotiates. Here is the first truth no one wants to admit. Women are walking a path that rewards short-term power at the cost of long-term emotional security. And the trade-off is brutal. At the center of this path is a silent recalibration of priorities. Love becomes optional. Partnership becomes inconvenient. Men become interchangeable. Commitment becomes a liability. What replaces them is validation, tension, autonomy, control. And control feels good at first, because control removes risk. It removes dependence. It removes vulnerability. But it also removes polarity. It removes bonding. It removes depth. And depth is where fulfillment lives. Modern women are encouraged to maximize options instead of choosing wisely. To delay attachment instead of building it. To test endlessly instead of committing intentionally. Dating becomes a marketplace, not a courtship. Men become additions, not partners. Connection becomes a transaction, not a bond. And the brain adapts. The more optional everything becomes, the less anything feels meaningful. This is not empowerment. This is emotional dilution. And the longer a woman stays on this path, the harder it becomes to turn back. Because here's the psychological trap no one explains. The behaviors that protect you in your 20s sabotage you in your 30s. And the habits that feel powerful in your 30s become liabilities in your 40s. Early independence trains emotional detachment. Endless choice trains dissatisfaction. Constant self-protection trains distrust. Over time, the nervous system stops associating intimacy with safety. It associates it with loss of control. So even when a good man appears, the body rejects him. Not because he's wrong, but because he requires surrender. And surrender feels like danger to someone trained to survive alone. This is where the path becomes irreversible for many. Because attraction shifts. Not upward, but sideways. Emotionally available men feel boring. Consistent men feel predictable. Peaceful men feel dull. Chaos feels familiar. Distance feels exciting. Uncertainty feels alive. And without realizing it, women begin chasing emotional volatility instead of stability. They confuse intensity with chemistry. They confuse anxiety with passion. They confuse unpredictability with desire. And each cycle reinforces the pattern. Short-term flings replace long-term bonding. Situationships replace relationships. Validation replaces devotion. Until one day the noise fades. The attention slows. The messages stop. The options thin out. And suddenly, independence doesn't feel empowering anymore. Feels quiet. This is where the fear begins. Not the fear of being alone, but the fear of being unwanted. Because here's the part no one talks about. A woman's social power peaks early, but her emotional needs peak later. And when those curves cross, the crash is severe. The same world that encouraged her to delay love doesn't help her rebuild it. The same culture that praised her independence doesn't sit with her loneliness. The same voices that said, "You don't need anyone," go silent when she realizes she wants someone. And wanting after long-term detachment feels humiliating. So many women double down instead of course-correcting. They become more guarded, more critical, more demanding, less flexible, less trusting. They raise standards not from self-respect, but from fear. Fear of settling, fear of losing leverage, fear of being seen needing something. But intimacy requires humility. Connection requires risk. Love requires exposure. And exposure feels unbearable to someone trained to armor up. This is where resentment sets in. Men are blamed for the outcomes of choices women were encouraged to make. Society is blamed for loneliness that autonomy created. Dating is blamed for patterns avoidance reinforced. But the nervous system tells the real story. Burnout, anxiety, emotional numbness, detachment disguised as strength. The dangerous path isn't that women became independent. It's that independence became identity. And identity is hard to let go of. Because stepping off this path requires admitting something painful. That some sacrifices were miscalculated. That some lessons were incomplete. That some freedoms came with invisible costs. It requires accepting that being desired is not the same as being chosen. That attention is not intimacy. That control is not connection. And most importantly, that strength without softness becomes isolation. This doesn't mean women are wrong. It means they were misled. Misled into believing they could override biology with ideology. Misled into believing attachment was weakness. Misled into believing self-sufficiency replaced partnership. But the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. It remembers touch. It remembers safety. It remembers being held without performance. It remembers being chosen without competition. And when those needs go unmet for too long, they don't disappear. They surface as anxiety, as anger, as dissatisfaction, as emptiness. This is the real danger. Not that women are failing, but that they're succeeding at the wrong game. Winning independence while losing intimacy. Gaining autonomy while sacrificing attachment. Protecting themselves out of love. And the hardest truth of all? The longer you walk a path, the harder it is to admit it leads nowhere. But awareness changes direction. The moment a woman realizes she doesn't need more power, she needs more polarity. Not more control, but more connection. Not more options, but more depth. That moment is uncomfortable. But it's also liberating. Because the path back isn't weakness. It's wisdom. And the women who turn around early don't lose anything. They gain everything that actually lasts. See the pattern. Protect your energy. This is DepthRealm.